Hello and welcome to the Catholic Sun Spotlight. I am Katherine Long, editor of the Catholic Sun, the Syracuse Diocese newspaper, and I am joined by Bishop Douglas J. Lucia for a conversation about Holy Week, the Easter season, and what lies ahead for the diocese. Thanks for being with us today, Bishop.
Oh, thank you, Katherine.
So last week, of course, the church celebrated Holy Week, and you celebrated Holy Week for the first time publicly since your installation as our bishop in 2019. Of course, last year, public Holy Week liturgies were canceled due to the pandemic. So you did a lot of live streaming and Zooming into people's homes last year. Not that that was any different this year, but we were able to be back in person and together. So can you tell us about the experience of celebrating those liturgies last week, and especially as it compares to your experience of it last year?
Well, I have to admit, I felt like I had the best of both worlds last week in the sense that we were still live streaming to our shut-ins and those who could not be physically present in the cathedral. But also at the same time, we were able to have a live congregation to be part of the rituals of Holy Week. And I enjoyed it so much. Of course, as I've often told people, my heart is the parish church. And so for me, it was just like just being back and being a parish priest and leading the Holy Week liturgies, which, of course, are some of my favorite.
Absolutely. Last year, you were celebrating these liturgies in front of basically an empty cathedral. Mm-hmm. How did you manage to do that? Who were you talking to?
Well, it's interesting. I will say this, we talk about the grace of the moment. And one of the graces of that moment we were in last year with the pandemic and with only 10 people allowed in church at most. And so for me, although I always felt the presence of the faithful, even as we were live streaming. So for me, the church was never empty. I still felt like I was celebrating to a full cathedral, that the people were there with me. And again, the difference this year is that there were actual people in the pews, but even last year, I still felt that we call it the communion of the faithful. I still felt that presence with me.
Absolutely. So, of course, yes, there were folks actually physically present at your liturgies this year. Churches in our diocese are now able to welcome up to 50% of their capacity, as long as they can keep that 6-foot social distancing measurement. Everyone is used to wearing masks and keeping distance and using hand sanitizer now. And what do you want people to know as, churches continue to reopen and activities begin to resume and the weather gets a little nicer and we're now able, as people get vaccinated, we're able to come together a little bit more? What do you want people to be thinking about, considering, as they prepare to re-enter parish life, worship in a more together kind of way?
Yeah. I think for me, one of the things I want people to know is that it's safe to come to church. But in order that people might feel that it's safe to come to church, they need to realize that we are going to use our common sense. And so for me, common sense is we can't let our guard down regarding safety, whether it's the social distancing, whether it's the hand sanitizer, whether it's the mask, even how we do things in church. Like we still will not have the communion cup at this time. We still won't have the at least what we call the handshaker piece, things like that. So to me, it's it's like two hands washing each other, in the sense of one hand has to say, don't be afraid, we're taking the precautions, but the other hand is, you need to take the precautions.
Absolutely. Further to that, last year, as the pandemic was accelerating, the Sunday Mass obligation was suspended. Here in this diocese, you suspended it. It suspended all over the place. That is still currently the case, correct?
It is. Yeah.
And do you intend to return that obligation anytime soon? Are you leaving it suspended for the time being? What's your thinking around that right now?
Well, there's a couple thoughts on that. First of all, the bishops of New York are in discussion regarding um, that particular obligation, that particular what we call precept. The I guess for me, though, even before the precept, is the idea that I want people to come to church because that it's an expression of their faith. I first, I so I guess my first reaction is I want people to want to come to church. Okay, that I shouldn't have to issue a precept saying you have to go every week. I want people to want to. And so for me, one of the things I do think we need to do is to have a renewal of our understanding of what Mass means, of what the Lord's Day means, which means keeping holy the Sabbath, what what the Eucharist is all about. Why is the Eucharist, the holy sacrifice of the Mass, why is that so important to us as Catholics? And so that's really the approach I want to take. And I do want to encourage people because we are getting vaccinated. We are the safety protocols have worked. So I want to say to people, okay, it is good for you to come back now, but it's also with the idea that there are still some folks, um, because of their own physical conditions, um, their own health conditions, or even sometimes just the fear that's still out there, that we have to be very respectful of that. And again, that's where I don't want to feel like I'm putting burdens on people in the sense of, oh, I got to go no matter what now. Um, and see, that's the other misunderstanding when it comes to the precept about Sunday Mass. Uh, we often use the term obligation, and of course, when you want people to, when you think something's important, of course, you use the word obligation. You want people to realize, well, I wouldn't be saying that you really needed to do this unless I thought it was important. But on the other hand, and um, when it comes to obligation, we're not obligated to do the impossible, or we're not obligated in a sense that if we're sick, we're not expected to be there. Or if there's a pandemic and we are susceptible to, we're in that vulnerable group, we're not then expected to go to Mass. That we are, in a sense, exempt from it. But again, we don't always think in those terms. Like when we think of obligation, is like I have to. Well, yeah, have to in the sense of it's important, but on the other side of that coin, um, it might be that you're not able to, and when you're not able to, the obligation doesn't exist.
So now that we are past Holy Week, we're talking about parishes and schools and businesses and all kinds of things opening up in a way that we haven't seen for a while.
Hmm.
We're entering into the 50 days of the Easter season. It
Right.
begins your confirmation season, among other things. What are you looking forward to in the coming weeks, in the coming months?
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to confirmations and being out in the parishes again. I'm looking hopefully to do even more parish visitations and when I'm not doing confirmations. Um, and an emphasis I have in this year's confirmation ceremony is all on the idea of the fruits of the Holy Spirit. And last year I focused more on the gifts of the Holy Spirit and what we needed to do, how they helped us on the road of life. This year, though, I want to talk about how those gifts of the Holy Spirit can bear fruit in our lives, in the sense and that the idea of the fruitfulness. Then there's a Matthew, if I'm got the right, Matthew 7:16, which is the end of the Beatitudes. Actually, it says, "By their fruits you shall know them."
Mm.
And so, in a certain sense, I really want to focus both with our young people, but with our diocesan churches. Okay, what kind of fruit are we bearing? I mean, here we're talking about going back to Mass and participating in the sacraments again, but what does that do for us in our daily lives?
Absolutely. So thank you again for being here with us.
Mhm.
Do you have a parting message for our listeners, our viewers, our readers? What would you like them to know as we are here in the Easter season?
I just think there were two themes I used over the Triduum this year. One was forever I will sing the goodness of the Lord. And that goodness of the Lord is what we're celebrating. And so hopefully we can be joyful. I think we've been under so much stress. And I just want to invite people, we need to enjoy life too, the life that God has given us. And he wants us to enjoy that life as well. So this might be that perfect opportunity to connect with him, especially if we're saying I don't really feel that joy. I don't. Well, maybe these next 50 days is where we can connect with Jesus, and just like he did to those who were in that locked upper room after Easter and others he met along the way, maybe he can, not maybe, I know he can, in a sense, stir into flame that gift of the Spirit. And again, one of the fruits of that Spirit is the gift of joy.
Well, Bishop, it's been a joy to be with you here. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for speaking with us. You can read this interview, watch it, and find even more at thecatholicson.com. And thanks for listening.